Emily, I want a divorce. The words came out of nowhere as I was washing the dishes. My husband John delivered them with an unexpected bluntness. But why? I asked, stunned by his sudden declaration. John's eyes glinted with a mix of determination and relief. I'm about to come into $3 million. That's a huge sum, isn't it? But it's my money, and I don't intend to share it with you. What does that have to do with a divorce? The truth is, I've been sticking around for the financial security. Your salary isn't much, but it's better than nothing, so I kept up with our marriage. But once I have that $3 million, I won't need you anymore. I want to live comfortably on my own, so let's end this now. Fine. If you have that much money, you can sell the house. It will cover the mortgage too. John was taken aback by my calm response. To me, this was a chance to escape a draining life. I placed some documents on the coffee table in the living room with a decisive thud. My name is Emily. I'm passionate about working with children, and I teach at a preschool. I met John, who is 2 years older than me, through a friend's introduction, and we've been married for almost 8 years. We bought a house with dreams of starting a family and envisioned a future full of joy. That's how I saw our early days together. But things changed quickly after we married. John's obsession with money grew. Before our wedding, he'd appraised my job. But soon after, he began belittling it. Emily, all you do is play with kids. I'm working hard here, and you're just coasting. They probably call people like you freeloaders. That became his mantra. He never seemed to understand how demanding my job was. Each child is unique, and we hold their well-being in our hands. It's a challenging job, but he ignored my frustrations, leaving me feeling frustrated and disheartened. The reason we don't have children, despite being married for 8 years, is tied to this very issue. John would often say, if you have time to have babies, you should be working more. Don't even think about using a baby as an excuse to quit your job. We have a mortgage and taxes to pay. What are you thinking? Don't bring up having kids again. Every time he yelled at me, I was left speechless. Sure, John is older and has a higher salary, but the difference is only a few $1,000s. Despite this, he constantly acted as if he was superior. Whenever I took pride in my job and felt fulfilled, his demeaning remarks made me feel humiliated. His words cut deep, and I often found myself crying quietly alone. Lately, John has been expressing a desire to be alone more frequently. In reality, I could live by myself, he said, but I've stayed with you out of necessity. Don't forget that. Why does he always belittle me? Maybe it's because of the increased overtime he's been putting in at work. He'd often blame me with statements like, it's because you're not working hard enough that I have to work overtime to make ends meet. You should be a little more grateful. Yet, despite his overtime, his salary didn't seem to be growing. I kept a close eye on our finances and noticed that the increase in his salary was minimal. Perhaps this frustration contributed to his anger, as he became more irritable and unreasonable than ever before. Who do you think is making this lifestyle possible? If I wanted to, I could leave you in a heartbeat. Be prepared, John said, his words carrying an almost threatening edge. This wasn't the man I knew before we got married. Since that moment, our conversations as a couple have dwindled significantly. Then came a day that plunged me further into despair. During a Thanksgiving visit to John's parents, his mother served tea and asked, you two have been married for 8 years now, right? Emily, you used to talk about wanting a child soon. Considering your age, have you decided how many children you want? I saw this as an opportunity to discuss our situation, so I started to respond. But John cut in, Mom, we're not having kids. Emily and I talked it over and decided. His mother's reaction was dismissive. Oh, I see. Well, she clearly dislikes the idea of caring for kids, whether at work or at home. What? Wait, Mom, that's not true. Could you stop bringing this up? It's stressful for Emily, too. Well, if that's your decision, it's fine. It's certainly a lot of work. With that, John's mother left the room, leaving me unable to address the issue. On the drive home, I asked, why did you let her believe that? I love children and want them. But you keep saying you don't want them. The truth is, we can't afford a child because you don't work full-time. Only start talking when you start earning as much as I do. I thought preschool teachers made more. What a disappointment. I don't like how you're putting it. From the start, I've never disliked children or planned on not having them. It's just that raising a child is financially challenging and you keep undermining my work. John simply laughed and said, "You should keep work and personal matters separate." I knew that was true, but I couldn't help but be troubled by his disregard. Children are sensitive to these issues, and his attitude made it all the more difficult. A girl named Amy from my class came up to me with concern in her eyes. "Miss Emily, what's wrong? You seem less cheerful today." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to worry you." "I'm fine," I replied, gently patting her head. Amy wasn't the most noticeable student, but her maturity and kindness spoke volumes. She must come from a loving family. "You're not fine, you're usually so cheerful." "I don't like seeing you like this," she said with a frown. Her concern made me feel even worse. Maybe my daddy can help with Miss Emily's problem. He's a superhero and helps lots of people. He's picking me up tomorrow, so I'll tell him. Amy's mother usually picked her up, but she mentioned that her father would be coming to the press school the next day because her mother was busy. I assured her I was okay, but Amy was adamant about introducing me to her father. I hadn't had much interaction with him since the school entrance ceremony, so I felt a bit nervous. The next day, as promised, Amy's father arrived to pick her up. "Thank you for looking after Amy. I'm her father," he said, extending his hand with a warm smile. "I've heard a lot about you from my daughter. I really appreciate that she seems to be enjoying her time here." "Oh, not at all. We're the ones who should be thanking you. Amy is a very kind girl." He struck me as a very polite person, but I wasn't ready to share my personal issues, especially since they were quite embarrassing and difficult to discuss. "I can tell Miss Emily is worried about something, so I want you to talk to my dad," Amy said, looking up at me with sincere concern. "Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate your care, but I understand how you feel. It can be hard to open up to someone, even if they're close. However, if there's anything troubling you, I'd be happy to help," her father offered. Surprised, I took the business card from Amy's father and noted his title. Reflecting on it now, that moment marked a turning point for me. It was then that I resolved to take action against John. As I was preparing for that change, John suddenly approached me. "Hey, how about we get a divorce?" It was a rare occasion that John came home early and we had dinner together. My hands, which had been washing dishes, froze. John must have noticed my shock and smirked unpleasantly. "You might not like it, but my feelings won't change." "May I ask why?" "A large sum of money is coming in." "Want to know how much?" $3 million. $3 million? I repeated, stunned. John continued without waiting for me to ask further. "I've been with you for the money. Compared to what I'm about to get, your contribution was just a drop in the bucket, but it was better than nothing. Now that I have $3 million, I don't need you anymore. Let's end this quickly. You must be tired of being a leech by now." "Where did all this money come from?" John brushed off my question with a dismissive wave. "That's none of your business. We're strangers now." "All right, I understand. Let's separate then." John looked taken aback by my quick agreement. "By the way, I have no intention of staying in this small house anymore. With $3 million, I'm thinking of moving into a mansion. So I'm planning to sell this house too." "That's fine. I'll start looking for an apartment. You'll pay off the rest of the mortgage, right?" "Yes, I'll cover it. It's the least I can do. Our circumstances are different now." "Thanks, that would be appreciated." With that settled, I began making plans. John observed my swift movements with a mix of curiosity and surprise. The days ahead were filled with activity as I packed up and searched for a new place. Once the divorce was nearing completion, I arranged another meeting with John to finalize the details. "I'll leave the mortgage payments to you, John. To avoid any future disputes about whether I said this or not, I've prepared a written agreement covering all these points. Please sign it." "Fine, as long as you don't start complaining about it later." John always had a way of adding unnecessary remarks that got under my skin. A surge of irritation bubbled up inside me, but I kept my composure. As John reviewed the divorce agreement, he suddenly stopped. "Hey, what's this about alimony? Why should I be the one paying? If anything, Emily, who doesn't work full-time, should be the one paying. You thought you could hide this from me? You're so naive." I remained calm and laid out some documents on the table. John's face grew pale as he saw them. "Thanks for all the overtime work you've been putting in every day. I appreciate it. You enjoy your job, don't you, John?" It must be nice to spend time with your mistress. I slid a photo across the table. John and a woman, looking quite cozy with each other. This woman, she's just a junior colleague. It just looks like we're close. Is this your attempt to trap me? Still denying it, huh? Then how about this? I placed another photo in front of him. This one showed John and the same woman entering a hotel together. I had hoped this evidence would shake him, but instead he erupted in anger. This must be a fabrication. Don't you know how advanced photo manipulation technology is these days? Do you really think you can fool me with this? I sighed heavily. I had anticipated John's stubbornness and had made preparations. This isn't something I took. The evidence is being handled by a professional. They should be here soon. Just then, the doorbell rang. John looked visibly uneasy as I went to answer it. I ushered the visitors into the living room. This is my attorney. The evidence was obtained through a private detective agency, so it's authentic. If you have any doubts, I can have them verify it for you right now. Nice to meet you, my attorney said, extending a hand. I'm Counselor Emily's attorney. From now on, we'll handle the divorce proceedings through me. Do you have any questions or concerns about the photographs? I'm here to address them. Seeing Kessler's confident smile, John began to panic. It turned out that John's claim of working overtime due to being overwhelmed was a lie. The private detective agency had discovered that he was actually leaving work on time. The reason his income hadn't increased was that he wasn't working extra hours. Instead, he was spending his nights with his mistress. The exposure of his affair finally clarified John's recent behavior. His insistence on wanting to be alone likely stemmed from his desire to be with his mistress. The lawyer I had hired was highly skilled thanks to Amy. Amy's father, the CEO of a prominent group, had truly been a superhero in this situation. When Amy heard about my predicament, she connected me with her father, who then referred me to a top-notch lawyer and a private detective agency. I initially thought it was excessive, but as I uncovered more of John's deceit, my anger grew, and I decided to take full advantage of the situation. You think you're the one making all the moves here. If you want alimony, fine. I have $3 million. I can easily cover that. Once you're done, just leave. I never want to see your face again. I would have left even if you hadn't said that. If anything comes up in the future, let's communicate through the lawyer. Don't come to me directly. Who would ever want to see you? He spat out, his disdain clear. I gathered my things in silence and left the house. If it had been anyone other than John, it might have felt more impactful. But his arrogance remained unchanged, leaving me to wonder how someone could be so conceited. As I walked away, I thought my story of revenge had reached its conclusion. Then, a few months later, as I was settling into my new apartment where the past felt distant, something unexpected happened. My source of stress was finally gone. Initially, the reality of the divorce had been overwhelming, but any remnants of affection for John had vanished. The relief was palpable. Despite this, John had the audacity to show up at my new place. Please will you listen to me? I beg you. His desperate pleas echoed loudly at the entrance, and against my better judgment, I let him in. What do you want? I've made it clear that I don't want anything to do with you anymore. John sneered as he surveyed my apartment. I find this place utterly disgusting, but for someone who's separated from me, it's not bad. If there are 2 rooms here, I could easily make one my own. What are you talking about? There's no way I'm going to live with you again. Don't be so harsh. We were once a couple, John pleaded, trying to soften his tone. We've officially become strangers through the legal process now. What exactly do you want? Don't speak to me like that, Emily. It's unsettling. I've realized now that I need you. You'd have a better life with me. You were living in a mansion with your mistress, weren't you? I guess you were just with me out of necessity. I don't need to be with you. No, it's just a moment of confusion. I need you, Emily. You're just being stubborn. Didn't you say you didn't need me anymore because of the $3 million? Why don't you find your next husband with that money? No, you're wrong. John suddenly burst into tears. The truth is, I said I was getting $3 million because I thought I had won the lottery. But I checked the numbers, and they were wrong. I jumped the gun. I was stunned into silence by John's bizarre confession. His pitiful pleas and the way he tried to paint himself as a victim left me shaking my head in disbelief. I don't know what to say, I finally managed. You've ruined everything, and now you're asking me to help you? John's eyes were pleading, desperate. Please, Emily, I messed up. I thought I'd have a fresh start with that money. I left my job and my mistress, and now I'm stuck with nothing. I need you. I promise I'll change. No, John, I said firmly. You've made your choices and you have to live with the consequences. I'm done with you, and I'm not going to be dragged back into your mess. John's face fell, and he slumped slightly. But what about the things we had together? Doesn't that count for anything? That was in the past. I've moved on, and so should you. You need to figure out your own way from here. John sighed heavily, realizing he wasn't going to get any sympathy from me. Fine, I understand. I'll leave you alone. With that, he walked out, leaving me with a mix of relief and lingering frustration. I locked the door behind him and took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. The last thing I needed was to be pulled back into his chaos. That's why I can't pay my loan and I don't have anywhere to live. Emily, you're my only hope. I've already told you that I can't help. If you stay here any longer, I will take legal action. Remember the agreement you signed when we divorced? If you breach that, I'll seek 5 times the alimony. Is that clear enough? Fury flashed across John's face as he raised his hand. Are you threatening me? If you touch me, I'll call the police immediately. This building has security cameras, so even if you try to escape, you'll be caught on tape. John's face went white at my words. Leave now, or I'll report you for trespassing. Hearing the threat, John bolted from the apartment, his hurried footsteps echoing as he stumbled down the stairs. I closed the door behind him without a second thought. Since then, John hasn't returned. Later, my in-laws came to offer their apologies, clearly surprised by the situation. When I inquired about John's condition, they informed me that he had fractured his leg when he fell down the stairs that day. He spent 2 months in the hospital, which added to his financial troubles. Along with the mortgage and alimony he owes me, he urgently needs to find work. John pleaded with his boss to let him work from home and retract his resignation, but his previous rudeness had sealed his fate. His boss refused to take him back, leaving John in a difficult position. With my in-laws covering the alimony, he was also burdened with the mortgage and mounting debts. He was truly facing a hard time, all because of his own actions. Once things had settled down, I visited Amy's house. When I informed Amy's father that everything had been resolved, he was visibly relieved and pleased. I've wanted to meet you for a while since Amy always speaks so highly of you. I didn't expect to meet you under these circumstances. I just made a few calls and things fell into place. I'm glad it worked out. I'm thrilled to see you smiling again. Amy has been a real life changer for us. I'm incredibly grateful. My husband underestimated me because I was a preschool teacher, but I've come to realize the value of every experience. I cherish each encounter more deeply now and remain passionate about my job, determined to give my best.